champion for children past, present, and future. The idea with this show is to raise awareness about adverse childhood experiences, to if you are an adult survivor of adult attention that you might need because of that trauma you've experienced, and to prevent adverse childhood experiences going forward. My guest tonight is Rachel Hoof. Rachel and I met just on Friday. We met on Friday, had with the city, had a meeting about the CWSS, and we had a lovely chat there. And I invited her on here. She's a woman who has lived experience, and she is an Indigenous woman, so her perspective is quite different than mine. And so I know I'm going to learn tons. Rachel, welcome to 1000 Ways.
Thank you, Alan. I'm really excited to be here and share whatever knowledge I can about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah, so where do you want to start, Rachel? I mean, you've experienced this personally. You've been an asset and a help to other people to help them deal with their trauma and tough times they're having in their life, and all the racism and discrimination and maybe poverty for some of the folks that you try to be of help for. So where would you like to start? Where's a good place?
Well, I'll just introduce myself, take a few minutes, and then you can get to know who I am, where I come from, and what I feel like I can contribute today, today's topic. So like I said, my name is Rachel Hoof. I'm from the Blackfoot Confederacy, member of the Kainai tribe. For those of you that don't know what the Blackfoot Confederacy is, it's made up of 4 tribes: Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and the South Piikani, across the medicine line, the border in Montana. And so we all are our own distinct nation, but we share language, we speak the same language, but we all belong to our own tribe. So I belong to the Kainai tribe, and the border is, the reserve is bordered by the 3 rivers, the St. Mary's, the Belly River, and the Old Man River. And so we're in between Fort McLeod, Alberta, Lethbridge, and Cardston. So in that sort of like triangular area, that is the nation that I come from. So I'm the youngest of 9, and the 7 of my older siblings attended the Indian residential school, and both my parents and my paternal grandfather attended the residential school. So right now in my non-work
7
life,
of your siblings attended, but you?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I was born in I'm a flower power child. I was born in the 60s. So at that time,
Go ahead, Rachel, sorry. There was a delay there. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's
a little feedback, but keep going, Rachel. You're doing great.
Okay, so yeah, I'm the youngest of 9, but myself and my brother, that's 2 years older than myself, we didn't attend the residential school, nor were we raised in child welfare or 60 scoop. We were raised at home by a single mom. So we left our home community and we moved to Calgary. So I was raised in a redneck Alberta. I shouldn't even say that, but it was very racist from the age of 7 up into my adult life. And then, so I experienced a lot of intergenerational traumas that come with being raised with family members that, experienced the residential school and also went into a church. I don't think I'll name the church here, but went into their assimilation program, which was to take the child and place them in a church home for 10 months out of the year. So a lot of what I'm trying to say is that I experienced a lot of trauma from the age of 7 on up. And when I returned to school back in 2014, I took the social work diploma course with Blue Quills University. It wasn't a university then, it was still a college. It wasn't until then, and we're going back 7 years now, did I really begin to understand the impacts of intergenerational trauma and how that impacted my family of origin and my family of creation, which are my children and my grandchildren. And so when I learned about ACEs, and you take, I think there's 12 questions, and if you score even above 3 or 4, it can lay the groundwork for future mental health addiction issues in your life, and then also compact that with all of the intergenerational impacts from the residential school, because I like one saying that I read in a book, and I can't remember who wrote it, but it said that us Indigenous people are like the walking wounded, when you're coming out of a war, only the scars are on the inside. And so I really like that saying. It really resonated with me because I felt that I had all of these emotional, spiritual, psychological scars that are wounds that were still open, and I was constantly being triggered over and over. And so I went through a phase in my life where I turned to coping with them negatively, talking about addictions, and then compound that with poverty, racism, couldn't get a half decent paying job. So it just really compounded. Then eventually I thought, you know what, I gotta get on a healing journey. And so that is, I'm 54 years old. And so we're just talking like recently, the last 10 years, where I've decided to really, really work hard at healing those past traumas. And it is tough work, but it can be done. And yeah, so what I wanted to get to, where I went off on, got distracted with the feedback or the strange noises from your talking, Ellen. I recently, I'm taking my master's of social work right now in the clinical stream with a specialization in advanced trauma practice. So with that, I've decided to do a research project, which I just actually today got the ethics approved, the ethics application approved. So I'm kind of excited about that. But it is really tough work because the research project I will be doing is what we call an autoethnography. So that is researching myself as the subject. So I'm the researcher and the subject that's being researched. Is anybody out there listening? Everything is so quiet. Any questions?
Whoa, wait a minute. Can you hear me, Rachel? Okay. I'm still here, but our connection is really flaky. So can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. You're doing great. Carry on. Don't worry about my flaky connection. I'm going to stop my video to try and keep my bandwidth up, okay? You keep going on. You're doing great.
All right. That's right. That's what always interferes when you have your video on. But you guys can hear what I'm saying, right? Without any interruptions. Okay.
Yes, can hear you just fine.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest things is having to look back at the past and not being stuck there, because I stayed stuck in the past for a good part of my life. But when I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I know these are some cliches that I picked up along the way that really helped me put the brakes on and say, the decisions that you're making today are the same decisions that you will be making or that you have made in the past, and nothing's changing. So what's got to change here, Rachel? So I had to take a really good, hard look at my life. And so I would have to say, I had to make some changes. I had to reconcile my past. And we talked about this when we first met, Alan, was racism. The trauma of racism is one thing that was really hard for me to work through, because I had internalized that, the racism that I experienced as a child in Calgary. And then having at one point in my life to decide whether that racism was going to destroy me or if I was going to turn it around and use it as a strength. And that, I'm not saying that everybody can do that, but that's one of the biggest struggles I've had in my life, is to keep forging forward and not allow those negative experiences that I experienced as a child. And I was the only Native girl in we were the only Native family. There was other Native families, but they weren't from the Blackfoot Confederacy. So even they were against us because for some reason, I didn't know this, that Blackfoots were seen as very to be feared. So I had there was another Native family in our community, and I thought I could just go play with them because we were, I thought, well, we're all Native, but they chased me away, and I didn't even know I was Blackfoot. They said, "You're Blackfoot, get away from me." And I was like, "What? I have black feet?" Like, and I went home and I told my mom, "Those Native kids will play with me. They said I have black feet." And they said, "Well, you are." And I was like, "What? I'm a Blackfoot?" I didn't know I was a Blackfoot. I thought we were all Natives. And so, well, we are all Natives. I just didn't know that we were from different nations. And so that was my first lesson, realizing, hey, the divide and conquer syndrome. But anyways, yeah, so I don't know, those are just some of the experiences that I've had to struggle with in my life. But throughout all of that, I have had a lot of supportive non-Indigenous allies, I guess you would call them today. But back then, they were people that supported me on my journey and encouraged me to keep going ahead with healing and bringing that healing to other people that, may be struggling with some of the things that I had as an urban Indigenous woman. Identify as an urban Indigenous woman because since I was 7 years old, I've only lived in the cities. Yeah, I'm not really sure what else you would like me to say. Through my educational journey, that's where I believe the opportunity to really take that time to dissect history, to dissect the experiences that I had and how they crushed me spiritually, emotionally, how some of the abuse that I went through, looking back on that, how that shattered my soul. And it wasn't until I had my first child when I was 21 that I realized that where I really first developed hope, because I didn't believe that I could actually love another human being. And then my daughter came into my life. She's 31 years old now. And, we have our mother-daughter issues, but I always tell people that if I didn't have her, I don't think that I would be here today because of my 9 siblings. 2 of my sisters have passed away in alcohol-related and drug. One overdosed on drugs back in the 80s. And so it's through that journey that I didn't want to go down that path, and I did not want my children to grow up without a mother. And so those were, those were a big part of my life that motivated me to change my lifestyle, because I know that nobody else can raise your children better than you can. So while I was fighting for my own life and survival, I was fighting to keep my kids alive as well, because I didn't want them to go through some of the traumas that I went through as a child. Now, mind you, I wasn't perfect, and I traumatized my kids unknowingly. And my daughter, who may be listening right now, her and I have done a lot of healing work together, and she's forgiven me as I'm working on forgiving my mother. And so that we're talking about intergenerational trauma, it can continue on to my grandchildren. And so when we stop and we really make that decision to change our life around and heal from the trauma in the past, you're changing the future for your children and your grandchildren and your future grandchildren. I'll share a teaching from Dr. Eduardo Duran. He's a fellow, he's a psychologist from the States. and he talks about healing the 14 generations. And when I went to his went to this workshop that he was the keynote speaker at, I thought, okay, I've heard of the 7 generations, but now there's 14. Like, come on, how many generations do we have to heal? And he talks about healing the previous 7 generations, meaning my ancestors, my parents that have moved on, my grandparents that also have passed on, and future, you know, our past generations. And he said, when we do our healing work here in this lifetime, we're healing that past generation, and we're also healing the next 7 generations to come. So the decisions I make in my life are going to impact both ways, past and future. And when I put it, when I listened to him, I was like, wow, that's a lot of responsibility for me, but I can do it. And so I got to work, and I carry that with me in my heart, that I have a huge responsibility. All of us do. And so I made a poster where I put a picture of a colonized woman protecting a fort, was a drawn picture, and a picture of an indigenous woman coming out of the forest with fur wrapped around her. And if you can imagine that, I drew the 7 generations like shadows, but they came up together like a circle. So healing both our settler descendant colonizers, their ancestors, and our future. And so you talk about reconciliation, and that's how I imagined it in my head, with using Eduardo Duran's 14 generations concept. So I just added on to it. And then in the middle, I drew like a medicine wheel, and showing very negative words like oppressed, savages, all the negative labels that are given or assigned to indigenous populations, and trying to flip that and making it more positive for both sides. So I don't know, do you want to pause for questions or comments, Alan?
Well, I do have a question. So like you're saying, the responsibility, huge responsibility of 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. But the other thing, a huge opportunity to make a huge contribution, right? To change positively for 7 generations to come. That's pretty amazing, right? That's what an opportunity too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I never thought I would see it in my time. I have 2 grandsons, which I love and adore. And, you know, I wanted to shield them from any adverse childhood experiences. But of course, you know, you can only do so much, because we're on our healing journey. We're going to intersect with other people in our life. But the things that I hear them talk about, and how I communicate with them as the grandmother, which I never had grandparents because they had already passed on. So I really cherish that role. And I nickname myself Grandmama, not Grandma. And so I just, it's a totally different relationship that I have with my 2 grandsons compared with my son and my 2 daughters. I don't even know how to explain it. I just want so much more for them than I even wanted for my children, if that makes any sense. And I would do anything for them, anything.
I don't doubt that at all. When you're talking about, where you're saying about being a parent, that I'm going to see if my camera will hold again, being a parent, and how, you made some mistakes as a parent, which every parent makes mistakes. Parenting is hard damn work, right? Hard work if there's 2 people that are, trying to, raise the children. And if there's enough resources in the house, right, that there's no shortage of money or that kind of those kind of resources or food, it's still hard, right? Then you get into like a single parent one, and maybe there's, light on income, and there's food insecurity, and, all those kind of things. And it's hard. That makes it super hard. But I know you're proud, Mama. You showed me pictures even of your brood there. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 7 generations, if your healing journey is going to make a difference 7 generations back and 7 generations forward, that's amazing, right? That's and so necessary, right? That we like get the healing occurring, right? It's with adverse childhood experiences, as you probably know, a lot of times the children who have been abused, they believe that they're at fault. They're broken. There's something wrong with them. That's why they were abused. So you add on to that, kids that have experienced ACEs who are also indigenous, right? Who have been told for generations, we don't want you here. We don't want you, like, become white or stop, basically, right? I mean, for 150 years, 6 generations, whatever that's been, we basically, white guys like me made up rules to say, hey, indigenous, they're not people, they're not humans, you can do whatever you want, basically. I mean, it's bizarre, but true, right? And not unlike what with blacks, where, guys like me, again, came up with a rule and said, oh, well, blacks aren't people, so you can buy and sell and trade them. I mean, it's just bizarre, but I think we're all on the same page now. I think that we're, recognizing that we're all humans, all have the same value, all have the same worth, all have the same potential, and how do we go forward and kind of create the opportunities for adults today who have survived childhood trauma to get healed, to somehow feel and move on with that, right? To get to a better life. And I'm not trying to in any way minimize it, but ultimately they want to heal. And how can others support that journey? And then also with kids, how can we stop the violence now, prevent the ACEs go forward, right? So do you got any great insights about that, Rachel? I mean, I really appreciate your thoughts on your healing journey and how this is more of a recent occurrence for you, right? Like, you've been, now you're, well, one, I guess, just even being a mom changed your life in that you decided, I'm going to be here, I'm going to stay strong, I'm going to be, right? So that made a huge difference in your life. Yeah. What do you think's the go forward? How do we move things forward, Rachel?
Well, I think we all have to, we're only responsible for ourselves right now to do the healing. I cannot heal my mother. I cannot get her to change her ways or her thoughts. And so it's when you make that shift, when you go inward, when you go inside and make those changes for yourself, you're not going to be so reactionary when you come up with, say, a relative who just knows what buttons to push. You're still going to get triggered. You're still going to want to react. But sometimes it's, the more you learn about yourself, sometimes it's harder to, so you don't get what I call taking the bait. And often we take the bait because we're so quick to react, and ego gets in the way, and we don't want our ego to be put down, or our ego says, wow, you can't be, why are you letting her talk to you that way? So and for me, it's I always have to keep myself in check. And I'm not gonna lie, I do fly off the handle sometimes, or else I retreat. And I rather just retreat and not be confrontational, because in the past there was so much anger just brewing in me that I could go from 0 to 100. And then you start just spewing all kinds of stuff that you don't really necessarily mean. You're just pulling out whatever tools you have to protect yourself. But so it's not always fight or flight mode anymore. Go into a state when you're well with yourself and you're good. And like, I could be walking down the street and I'm just in my own mind thinking, and then say someone says a racist slur or racist comment. Sometimes I'm just taken off guard and I'm just like, is that meant for me? No, give it back, but it all depends on what state of mind you're in at the moment. I don't always say, oh, take the higher road. Sometimes it bothers me all day and I have to keep asking myself, what's coming up for you? What's coming up? Like just having that internal conversation with myself. What's coming up for you, Rachel? What's in here that still needs to be healed? And then treat it with love and compassion.
but that self-awareness is super important for the healing to occur, right? You have to be aware. And that's, as you said, like the responsibility, you can only control or you can only influence yourself, right? You can only change your perceptions and change your reactions and pause when you have experienced something negative to choose the best reaction, go forward, right? The best reaction to move yourself, your healing along, and hopefully to kind of mend with others out there as well, right? So
Yeah, and when you look back at like how much energy it just takes away all your energy to be constantly thinking about how I should have reacted. Why didn't I say this? And then you move to anger, and then you're like, why? And I've done that so often in my life that I just don't want to be that person anymore. And then at the end of the day, I'm drained, and I'm like, what the heck, why wasted a whole day pissed off about something that, I could have been enjoying my day. So you learn from that, and it's like a muscle, you exercise it, and some days you just like, I'm just too drained. I don't have the energy to put into that person or that scenario or whatever.
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Humor,
Exactly.
for me, humor has got me through. I could kill myself laughing. I think of something so crazy. I think of something so crazy I did or said, and I'm like, why did I say that? Oh my God, they must think this. Or I just think of crazy things in my head and I laugh. Humor for me is huge.
It's very important, man. Humor is like just if more laughing, more singing, more dancing, more relationships that way, life would be so much sweeter for all of us, right? Don't you think? Like, we get too judgy and too determining that it has to be this way, and it doesn't have to be this way. We're all unique humans on our own journey, and let's let each other have that unique journey that we're on, right? And yours is going to be different, mine totally fine, right? Your daughter's is going to be different, yours, that's okay too, right? So yeah, yes. So a little more compassion, a little more caring, a little more allowing people to be who they are. Would you agree, Rachel?
Yeah, definitely. Just chill. We're all in this together is the latest motto.
Yes, yes. And you know what? I think that's one thing positive about COVID, that, if you've been paying attention, you realize that, yes, we are all connected. We're all in this together. Your health matters to me. My health matters to you, right? And to our whole community, right? That's super, that insight of how we are connected. And I realize from an Indigenous lens, that's always the case, right? Indigenous view everybody and everything as connected, right? And that is healthy in terms of relationships with other people, relationships with the land, right? Those are that we're all connected are very, very important things, which I think to a large degree has kind of been lost, right? Like I think I mentioned this to you. I was in a course with Dr. Bruce Perry, and it was, I think it's Shelley Spirit Chief, if I recall correctly, is her name. She's like an elder and does healing with EDMR. Anyways, and they were talking about the neurosequential model and wisdom of the elders. And in essence, the wisdom of the elders is about all of the supports, the human connectivity that traditional Indigenous ways had, right? Which that doesn't exist anymore, right? There's, in a traditional Indigenous community, there'd be whatever, 40, 50 people. They'd be looking out for each other. Little kids would get supported from adults and aunties and uncles and older siblings and all that kind of thing, right? Whereas now, what is it? There's like two people living in a 2,000 square foot house, and they have no connection with anybody outside of them, or very, very limited connection, right? So a lot of the connectivity that came naturally before doesn't, right? So a lot of those relationships suffer because of that, I think. So
Yeah, and you talk about the residential school syndrome. What that did with a lot of us was disconnect each other from our family, our kinship ties, and we weren't able to learn some of the things that should have been taught to a child as we were growing up, and mainly identity. We lost
sure.
I lost my identity. I wanted to be at a stage in my life where I wanted to be anything but Indigenous, because being Indigenous was, in my mind at that time, not a good thing.
Right.
And
Sure.
when I reconnected with my culture, I had to be easy on myself and forgive myself because I didn't know any better, and I couldn't say it, and that's internalized racism because I was constantly told over and over, you're ugly, you're this, you're that, you're brown, you don't fit in, just negative messages. And those negative messages outweighed all of the positive messages I was also receiving. I didn't listen to the positive messages. I could get 10 positive comments, compliments, but I get one negative one and bam, I'm right back down there again. So that's another healing process, is the trauma that comes from racism on a
Yeah.
individual
Yeah. And
and
just,
working past that.
you know,
Yeah. And
with,
like for me, the triggers I know that I have are and again, these are just my triggers. I'm not saying these are bad people, but it seemed to me as I was growing up, it was red-haired kids that would decide, hey, we're going to pick on Rachel today. And I'm
mm,
sure we all bullied one another. I was a bully. I know I was a bully because I had to protect myself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, so how do you think, what's your thought, your view, Rachel, is how we can, oh, wait, I had one other insight. You had said about, negative comments and positive comments, and the 10 positive comments didn't seem to count for anything, but the one negative comment would. And that is, I think, our human nature in general. Our brain is wired for threats, right? So anything that's negative, we're paying attention to that. So I've heard it expressed this way. Our brains look at negative, and as they regard them as like Velcro, they're going to capture that, right? And all positive, it's kind of like Teflon. It just kind of flows off, right? It doesn't connect, right? And I think I don't know how that changes, but ultimately a little bit more focus on the positive parts of it, and to encourage and support those strengths and those positive things that are happening, is going to be advantageous for anybody, right? Like that
Yeah.
you can, that
Well,
resonates with you and motivates you.
I think having those conversations with our kids, hey, look, I'm your mom. I think you're super. I'm going to always give you good comments and think you're just the most awesome kid in the world. But you know what? When you step out this door, there's people that are going to say mean things to you. So how are you going to deal with that? And nobody has that conversation. You
Nope.
walk out and you're just an easy open target, and then you don't know how to handle that, because when you go home and try to explain to your family, hey, they called me this or called me that, they don't deal with the feeling. They just tell you, oh, you got to be stronger than that. Don't let that get to you. But like, they didn't know how to talk to us and talk about our feelings, because
Sure.
talking about your feelings made you vulnerable and you had to be tough. But the messages to me were, you have to be a tough Blackfoot woman. Don't ever walk with your head down. Don't do this, don't do that. They didn't tell me how to process my feelings,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And
Yes.
so those were some of the messages. And I think a lot of us, like, we don't talk to our children in a kind, compassionate way, because we're going to be triggered,
Yes.
like just a quick example before we leave. My grandson, talking to him, taking him back to school shopping, got him a loan, and I know he's struggling as a 13-year-old boy. And, I just told him, I love you. I'll do anything for you. If anything comes up, if we have cell phones, you just text me. I want you to know Grandma loves you, because I know now you're 13 and you're going to be going through some changes and you're going to be wanting to fit in, and you still at the same time want to go back to being a little boy. I said, and that's okay. I said, if you get confused or don't know who to talk to, if you can't go talk to mom or dad, you call me and I'll be there for you. And I want you to know I love you 100% all the time. And he was crying. And I was like,
That's
oh,
beautiful, Rachel. Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And I let
That
him cry.
level of support for that little guy, that's going to make a huge difference in his life, right? That he has somebody that he can talk to, right? Somebody who's going to be non-judgmental and supportive and help him. Maybe he can't have that conversation with his parents, but if he can have it with his grandma, woohoo, that's awesome. So, yeah. Cool. Rachel, is there any other, hey, do we want to talk about healing circles a little bit, or no? Do you want to share that a little bit?
Well, sure, I could share. I run a 3-day grief and loss group, which is all about circle work and energy work and light work. So I have run quite a few grief and loss, and I incorporate my Indigenous way of healing and knowing, along with Western ways of just connecting to our breath, our energy through groundedness and breath work. So
Yeah.
breathing for anxiety, breathing to calm yourself and get yourself grounded. And so and I got my training from Dr. Jane Symington up at St. Albert with Taking Flight Corporation. She's an awesome instructor. So those are the healing circles I do. And it's a lot of people think, is that heavy work? But I think I guess I could say I'm a healer in terms of a helper, because I derive a lot of energy from my own spirit. Grief and loss, like some of the stories they share are tragic, but because I've done my own healing work, I'm able to do this work with them. And I'm still learning. I'm always going to be learning. But the transformation that I see take place is healing for me, because I just know that I've helped somebody out of a prison, even if it was just for those 3 days. They slide back,
Yes.
they can always come back. They could always call me. And so that's what I do. It's called ambiguous loss, because when you have one loss after another, which unfortunately occurs in my community and a lot of First Nation communities, you can't even heal from one loss. Then you have another loss and
Right.
another.
It's just like getting knocked down from one wave hits you, and as soon as you're trying to get up, another wave knocks you down again, right? So yeah.
And so I experienced that myself. I shared earlier that I had lost 2 sisters. I also lost a father tragically, that too soon, before their time, due to alcohol and drugs. And so I grew up always wondering, like, where did they go? What happened to them? And just on my healing journey, just making that connection that, we're all related, we're all connected. And so I get that when I did my own work, my own grief and loss work, that's where, I've had like so many wonderful opportunities that have been provided to me without me really asking, and just saying, well, just go with it. This came up for you, so go with it. Whereas others might think, oh no, I'm not ready to go there, and they miss out on that opportunity for healing. I don't know. I think it's I'm always looking for opportunities to heal.
Right. And why not, right? If there's something that you teach me and I can implement that in my life, and it makes my life 1% better, hallelujah, that's good news, right? And so if there's a sharing and there's something that that I can learn, or I know that you can learn, and then we can help each other move along to a better version of ourselves, that's a beautiful thing. With the healing circles, if maybe I'm not explaining it right, but you tell me, if Bob had victimized Sarah, instead of going to jail, go ahead. What?
Okay, yeah, there's those healing circles, but these ones that in my work world, the urban Indigenous peacemaker program, those are like restorative justice circles. Yeah.
Explain that one too. Explain that too.
So they're very similar. Restorative justice circles, we try to stay away from, okay, one way is to deal with it in the courts, where we punish the offender, and we say, you did really bad things, so you go spend time in jail and get rehabilitated. Well, we all know that jails do not rehabilitate people. They only learn to connect with other people that are committing crimes, and they almost graduate to another level. So with our peacemaking circles, what we do is we ask the offender to, of course, be accountable for the damage that they've done to the relationship. And we also ask the person that has been the relationship that has been harmed. So you could say the victim, but we like to say the person that was harmed. And they have to agree to come to the circle as well. and they can bring their supports. It could be a support worker, a relative, it could be an elder. So in the peacemaking circle, of course, I'll have a male and a female elder who will open with a smudge and ask that everything that is going to happen in the circle will happen in a good way, and that healing will come to the person that has caused harm to the relationship. And I facilitate, and so we would go 4 rounds. The person that is also the offender also can bring supports in. And so we'll go around 4 times around the circle. There could be up to 10 people there, the elder, the facilitator, myself, a helper, and then the victim and the offender and their supports. So say they each bring 3 supports, we could be up to 12 people. But unfortunately with COVID, I haven't been able to run any of these circles. And it also takes the courts to refer somebody who's involved. A community member could also refer. We could do these restorative justice circles within schools. You know, when you have students fighting, you can bring them together and say, okay, you know, this is what's done. So the person has to become accountable. Both parties have to become accountable, and they have to work together to restore the harm that was caused to the relationship. And then there'll be other community members that can also step forward and say, you know, say, for example, he needs to go for anger management, go to get some treatment for his drug and alcohol, then we can refer them to that. And the community's right there.
Excellent.
And
so it's really,
it's non-adversarial, and it's not so much blaming. We realize the person who caused the harm needs support too.
right.
But so does the victim. And in the court system, the victims don't often have a voice.
They have their victim impact statement, and that's basically it, right? That's the extent of the voice that a victim's going to have, right? So
yeah. And so in the peacemaking circle, the victim has a voice.
Yeah. And the offender is addressed, right? The offender, because what person would choose to use violence if they didn't have to, right? I don't think there's anybody would, right? Like most human beings, it's not a natural thing. It's kind of like where their suffering comes out in violence, right? But it's not like anybody chooses to. You didn't hold one of your babies in your arms and say, oh, this kid's going to want to be beaten, rape people. Like, I mean, that there's no child that has that thought or that way, right, about them. It's something that gets taught and learned and kind of beat into them, I guess you might say, right? So
yeah.
Have you ever seen that thing, Step Inside the Circle, with that Fritzy, I can't think of her last name. She goes to this like a very like a maximum security type prison, and she has all the prisoners come out in the yard, and then she has a megaphone or a bullhorn thingy, and she just starts saying, if you were told every day that you were a useless piece of shit and you got slapped around every day, step into the circle. And all these tough, tattooed, big, everybody steps in the circle. And she asked like a series of questions, and this circle just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? These guys are just moving together, and they're moving together because so the court system, the criminal justice system, is punishing them for sure. So they're punishing the people who had the shittiest lives and the worst circumstances. Instead of them getting the help they need to have a better life, they're punished, right? There's one black man who's like, I think he was like 78 or something. And he said, this is the best day of my life. People understand the suffering that I've endured, right? Because he never had a voice to express that before, right? So yeah. Hey, Rachel, is there any other words of wisdom we got to share? Otherwise, I think this has been a fun conversation.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything else to contribute, but we could discuss this all night long and just keep going. I just want to thank you for having me on your talk show or whatever, your YouTube channel. As we zoom in.
Thanks for coming on and doing it. I think it's great. We need, and when I say we, like we need more conversations. We need more connectivity, right? And so I'm very grateful that you came on and shared your wisdom and your knowledge and your healing journey. Thank you so much for that. I want to learn more from you. So perhaps we could do this again. All right?
Sure. Yeah, we can make it a series.
A series, exactly. Yeah. It's going to be the Rachel Allen Indigenous Healing Hour.
Yeah, let's figure out how we can heal together. Reconciliation, but not reconciliation. No. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was great. Keep yourself well, and I would like to talk to you more about this at another date. Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
All right.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Thank you much. Bye.